Part 2. Summer. Chapter 5. Katyusha stood in her room and looked at herself in the mirror. She turned to see how the swimsuit she was given fit her. It was a little tight, but overall it fit just fine. It was surprising that Vanya had something like this just lying around, especially something that fit her in her unusual stature. "I wonder," muttered Katyusha, "could these have come from Vanya's family?" Over the last few months, the two had grown closer. The tense nature of their relationship had faded, but they still were nowhere near to being extremely close. Katyusha still did not know a whole lot about Vanya, but he had been more willing to help her find out who she was as a person and discover herself through meditation. Each night Katyusha meditated on the day past, and for some time as well on the life that she had led leading up to this point. But the best part of Katyusha's day was the time that her and Vanya would spend together during the day. Vanya would often read to her or play games with her, and today he was going to take her swimming for the first time this summer. Vanya knocked on Katyusha's door. "Are you ready?" he asked. Katyusha perked up, realizing that she had gotten caught up in her own thinking. "Oh, yes," she said as she got up and opened the door for Vanya. "I'm all ready," she exclaimed. "Right then, let's go," said Vanya. He carried with him some towels and a picnic basket as the two entered Vanya's wagon. "Where are we going?" asked Katyusha. Vanya turned the key to the wagon and allowed it to idle. "Just outside of town. There's a nice little lake not too far away. We'll go there to swim." The two drove, and for the first time in months Katyusha had the chance to leave the residence of Vanya to go somewhere else. The two drove through the countryside and into a small town near where Vanya lived. It was a quaint little town with people working and shops busy. Katyusha looked out the window to the passers-by and smiled a little. She wished that life could go back to how it was before the war. But if life afterwards could be like this, then perhaps it was not all too bad. The wagon came to a stop at the end of town. Katyusha looked up and spotted a group of soldiers in what looked to be some sort of checkpoint. "Who's there?" asked one of the soldiers as he stood beside the wagon's window. "Vanya?" "Dmitri!" exclaimed Vanya. "It's good to see you, friend." "Good to see you too, friend. Who is this?" he asked as he peered in. "It's a friend of mine, Dmitri," replied Vanya. "Well, a friend of Vanya is a friend of ours. Go on ahead." He laughed, allowing them to pass. From where Dmitri had stood, he could not fully see who was in the car with Vanya, but he trusted his old friend. Katyusha sighed as they left the checkpoint. "That was rather close," she sighed. "I'll say. I didn't think they'd have checkpoints. I hope this isn't something to stay," replied Vanya. The two made it to the beach and exited the wagon. Katyusha ran for the water and took off her slippers, dipping her toes into the water. She jumped back but laughed as she did so. "The water's cold, Vanya," she exclaimed. "Then you'll just have to run in," he replied from where he was setting up a place for them after they swim. "Come with me. I don't want to go alone," she said. "All right," replied Vanya, approaching the water. Vanya stood at the edge with Katyusha and waited for her to move. "Well?" he asked. "It's too cold," she cried out. "Here, take my hand," said Vanya. Katyusha hesitated, but then lifted her small hand to Vanya's and placed it within his palm. Vanya took hold of her and ran into the water, pulling Katyusha with him. "Wait!" she screamed with joy. The cold water washed over Katyusha's waist, but she continued to follow him. Katyusha was now up to her chest in water, though Vanya was only up to his stomach, arguably the most sensitive part of his body, or at least one of them. "No fair. I didn't know you were going to do that." "Sometimes that's how life is to you," he stated matter-of-factly. "Is that another little thing that we have to learn from life?" asked Katyusha mockingly. "It is indeed." "Well, here's something I learned for you," replied Katyusha with a mischievous grin. "What's that?" asked Vanya. "Never let your guard down," she stated, splashing water over Vanya. "You sneaky little woman," he laughed, giving chase as Katyusha launched herself into a swimming position and moved across the water gracefully. Vanya tried his best to keep up, but the smaller woman was just too fast. When the two had finished swimming, they walked back onto the beach and sat down to eat. "I hope you like summer sausage," stated Vanya. "I do," replied Katyusha. They sat under the sun and enjoyed their meals in company. Vanya had brought with them tea and crackers as well to eat with their summer sausage, and when they had finished it, it was already afternoon. Katyusha looked at Vanya as he ate and smiled. It was just like old times, except he wasn't Nona. Vanya looked up to see Katyusha frowning. He didn't pay too much attention until she started to cry a little. "What's the matter?" asked Vanya. "I miss my friend," she stated. "The one at the courthouse?" he asked. "Yes, Nona." "What is she like?" asked Vanya. Katyusha looked up and answered, "She's the best friend anybody could ever dream of. She always reminded me to take naps. She allowed me to ride on her shoulders. We used to play games together, and..." As Katyusha answered his question, Vanya realized how innocent she really was. Could a girl who played games and got shoulder rides and had afternoon naps really be so evil? Was he right about Katyusha? "And she really, really loved and cared for me. Like a mother. Like a friend." "She really means that much to you, huh?" asked Vanya. Katyusha looked around back and forth before digging her hand into her swimsuit and pulling out her necklace. She at first only held it for herself, before at last turning it so Vanya could see. "This is the last thing she gave me. When we were trapped in the palace, on that fateful night, I never thought I would see her again, and she gave me this to always remember her by." Vanya swallowed hard. "You lost your friend that night?" he asked nervously. "Yes, my best and only friend." Vanya could feel his heart sink as he knew the day that she spoke of. He was there, not by choice but because he had to lead his men into battle. "Shall we go home?" asked Vanya. "Mm-hmm," hummed Katyusha.